like a Mashiach statement. No such thing exists.
Really?
No.
Okay.
But okay. Open up. We're gonna go. We're on page 198 in this book. Okay. I don't know which book Yossi has. Which book do you have over there?
I don't know. I have my second Megillah over here.
We're on Daf Base. Daf Base. Yes. Amud. We're about to turn the page to the bottom of Amud Aleph, I believe. Yeah. Last line of Amud Aleph. The words Rav Ashi. Carol, hi there. So we're starting from the book of Talmud. I'm not sure if you have it with you, but we're on page 2, side A, last line. So we haven't learned in a long time. Who remembers anything that we've learned? Okay, I'm gonna try to remind
Something
you
with the Megillah.
something about the Megillah, about Esther, about Mordechai, about Purim.
When he makes a decision, it goes over 10 other rabbis.
Who?
Rabbi Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva. That's very good. That's correct. Okay, so let's summarize where we are right now.
And he was about Shuvah.
He was a major Baal Shuvah. Yes. Let's summarize. The Mishnah told us a ruling, and the ruling was that the Megillah is normal. Purim is the 14th or the 15th in the walled cities. The Megillah is read normally in the 14th or the 15th. Sorry if you just don't mind to mute yourself, Carol. But however, those that are living in the villages, they can read earlier, already starting from the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. And then we spent some significant time trying to figure out the source for that. We have 2 different sources for that. We have Zman, Zmaniyem, Zmanam, Zmanam, etc. Or we have Yamim, Kayamim. Okay. Then the Gemara asked the question. Because on Rabbi Yochanan taught that our Mishnah, which is a Stam Mishnah, it's an anonymous Mishnah, it's the opinion of who? Who are many anonymous rulings in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. Yes, that's his ruling, that the villagers can read earlier. However, the Chachamim, the rabbis, the sages, the majority opinion is not like that. And that even villagers cannot read earlier. Okay? Then the Gemara said, whoa. That's a pretty big statement to make, that there's an entire body of rabbis that disagree with our Mishnah. And furthermore, that we quoted a Brisa. Remember that a Brisa is a teaching of the Tanaim, of the Talmudic sages, that was not included in the book of the Mishnah. And the Brisa is the name of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda said, when can villagers read earlier? During temple times, when there was an organized way to inform people when the new month is, with messengers, with the Betin, etc. Once the temple was destroyed and people were living all over the place, and people, how would you know what the date? How would you know when Pesach is, for example, when the Seder is? You would just do a month from the Megillah reading. Well, if you're going to do Megillah reading earlier than that, you're going to screw up your whole Pesach. So therefore, after the temple is destroyed, this law does not apply anymore. Now, this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that the law for the villagers that they can read from the 11th applied once upon a time, it doesn't apply anymore. Who does he go according to? Not according to Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah ruled all the time. We have this dispensation for the villagers even after the temple was destroyed. How do you know, by the way, that Rabbi Akiva's ruling in the Mishnah is for all the time? Because Rabbi Akiva lived. When did he live? Actually, he lived during the destruction. He lived part of his life beforehand, but most of his adult rabbinic life was after the destruction. And so if he felt that his ruling only applied before the destruction, but after, he would have to say that. When he says a ruling so flat out like that, he certainly means it includes also after the temple was destroyed. So this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that makes this distinction is for sure not according to Rabbi Yehuda. Nor is it according to the Chachamim, the sages, the way Rabbi Yochanan explained them, because they said the villagers never have this dispensation. So how does this ruling come about? So in the end, we did a resolution and we said that Rabbi Yochanan misunderstood the sages and Rabbi Yehuda was quoting according to the sages, and therefore the argument that originally started like a very big argument is now a smaller argument. The bigger argument that Rabbi Yochanan said it was that Rabbi Akiva allows the villagers always, pre and post the destruction, to read earlier. Rabbi Yochanan, the rabbi said, never, not pre nor post, do they have this dispensation. That's a very big argument. But according to our conclusion, the conclusion was Rabbi Akiva says always, the Chachamim, the rabbis, as Rabbi Yehuda explains, say prior to the destruction, the villages had this dispensation, but following the destruction of the temple, they don't have this dispensation anymore. But our Mishnah, which rules like Rabbi Akiva, rules that even after the temple was destroyed, the villages still do it like that.
Was the Great Assembly still intact?
No, not anymore.
That was it.
That was the issue, that after the temple was destroyed, even already 40 years or 100 years before the temple was destroyed, the Sanhedrin was dismantled. There was no central rabbinic authority anymore. It was already a chaotic time. How much more so after the destruction, when Jews were really dispersed everywhere and anywhere. Talking about the calendar, it was a big issue. And now I want to say a word about the calendar. There's something very interesting going on generally, no matter which opinion you go according to, because the whole argument is about the villages. But the fact is, nobody argues that some people observe Purim on the 14th and some on the 15th, right? If you're in a regular city, the 14th, and the walled city, the 15th. We're going to be talking about that today. Till now, we're talking about the villagers. Now we're going to get to regular people. 14th. But it's interesting that a festival is observed on 2 different days. Now, this is one that is written into the law. But there's been times of great debate about the calendar and about dates and about when to observe festivals. Now, you have to understand that we don't always appreciate this, but the concept of Jews all over the world, whether it's in Peru, Cuba, America, Australia, Israel, France, or Iceland, all have the same calendar and all observe the festivals on the same day as each other. That's a very big deal. It's a very important thing. It's what has kept us a people, even though we're so far spread apart. There are many other festivals in other religions or other cultures that have spanned, different parts of the world, and sometimes there are different dates. Some do look at, and then already once you're getting into different dates, you've already split up as a people. You no longer have that body as one nation. Therefore, we have to appreciate the calendar. So, for example, what was the first mitzvah that God gave the Jewish people coming out of Egypt, even before they came out of Egypt? Before he told them to take a lamb and bring the Karban Pesach, the first mitzvah was the calendar. Rosh Chodesh, how to establish a new month, this kind of moon. The calendar was so important. Today we take it for granted because we have calendars in our phones and we have calendars wherever you go. Printed calendars, digital calendars. So today we don't even understand. Imagine before print and before the digital world, and when everything was truly being run by the cosmos, by the sun, by the moon, the calendars, the leap years. It was an art, and it was essential to Jewish life and keeping the nation together. So here is a story that the Talmud relates. There were 2 great sages. One, and this is during the times of Rabbi Akiva. One was Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel was actually the head of the Beit Din. He was the Av Beit Din, the Nasi. He was the president of the community. And then there was another couple of rabbis, and in this story, it's Rabbi Yehoshua. And Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua, in general, they butted heads a little bit, or a lot. There's some bigger stories than the one I'm going to tell you, even though the one I'm going to tell you is a pretty big story. Story goes that once upon a time, 2 witnesses came to the court to testify that it's Rosh Chodesh. The rabbis, Rabbi Gamliel was leading the show over there. They interrogated the witnesses. And there was something about their testimony that was not so convincing to some. And there's 2 different versions in the Talmud, or 2 different stories. Maybe they said we saw the moon yesterday, but we didn't see the moon today. We saw the moon at one end of the sky at the beginning of the day, and then the other end of the sky at the end of the day. Something that anyone with some basic astronomical, is that the word? Astronomical knowledge would know that something is suspicious over here. Well, however, Rabbi Gamliel, who's the head of the court, he accepted their testimony, and he declared Rosh Chodesh. This is, by the way, the month of Tishrei, which means if today is Rosh Chodesh, today is the first Tishrei, that today is what? Rosh Hashanah. There was another sage there who disagreed with the testimony, and Rabbi Yeshua said, I agree with you. I don't agree. Today's not Rosh Hashanah. It's tomorrow. And now that became this major story, front page news in the New York Times the next morning. Rabbi Gamliel declared Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh, and Rabbi Yeshua said no. You understand? It's like going on in Congress. This person argued, the vice president argued with the president. Rabbi Gamliel was very offended. Rabbi Gamliel had a interesting, from the stories we know about him, he was a strong man and he didn't take it easily when somebody disagreed with him. He wanted to teach Rabbi Yeshua a lesson. So let's say it was Monday, for example. So Monday, Rabbi Gamliel says Rosh Hashanah. So when is Yom Kippur? Next? Wednesday. Right. Rabbi Gamliel ordered Rabbi Yeshua. Ordered Rabbi Yeshua. Next Thursday, I order you to come to me with your staff, with your money belt. Come to me the way you would, as you know, today in today's language. I want you to have your cell phone on you. I want you to drive to me. I want you to come visit me. Now, next Thursday, according to Rabbi Gamliel, the day after Yom Kippur, but according to Rabbi Yeshua, it was Yom Kippur. And he's ordering him, I want you to come, I want you to drive to me, bring your cell phone, bring your money, bring your wallet, bring it all. It's a major story, and Rabbi Yeshua wasn't sure what to do. Everyone spoke about it. In the end, he actually did obey, meaning he felt it's Yom Kippur today, but the Av Bezdin said, I have to come, so I have to listen. And there's a law that says that when what's the law when a Bezdin rules factually incorrect? You still follow the Bezdin. The Torah says, Lo tasur, you should not deviate from the teachings of the sages. Miyamin or small, the expression is, right? To the right or to the left. So simple meaning is don't go too far right, don't go too far left, find a good place in the middle. But the Rashi says, the Gemara says, even if they rule that the right is left or that the left is right, meaning they ruled an incorrect ruling, definitely incorrect, just search the data, search the law, they're wrong, you still have to follow the word of the Bezdin. So Rabbi Yeshua said, I think they're wrong, but I'm still going to do it. There ended up being a lot of drama and with the whole Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua relationship. There was at some point in time, not with this story, but with a different story, Rabbi Gamliel ended up being deposed as the head. The people revolted. There's another story where he even greater. He humiliated Rabbi Yeshua, and the people wanted to protect Rabbi Yeshua's dignity. So that's another story that we'll talk about at a different time. So you can see what kind of disagreements there could be about dates. It's so easy back in the day to be a day off for everyone else. And once you have a community, and by the way, there's other stories go back 1,000 years ago in the 10th century. There was a period of time that the Jews in Israel versus the Jews in Babylon were keeping different days, because there was one of the great Gaonim in Israel had an opinion, and the difference of the opinion of the great Gaonim in Babylon, in Bavel, in Iraq, and there was a period of time until it took, I think, 2 years to straighten it out. But until then, there were Jewish communities keeping things on different days. That's a terrible thing to happen, but it has happened. I'm not going into that. Today we have an issue that came to light about 80 years ago, 70 years ago, as follows. The Dateline, I'm not going to go on a tangent right now, but the Dateline presents a big issue because, Australia, yes, and the big question is, where is the Dateline? Meaning, according to the Torah, where's the Dateline? Doesn't even make sense. Torah doesn't even talk about a Dateline, but there must be a Dateline because that's how the globe has to be. It has to be a cutoff time, right? So, but where is it? And there's a lot of different opinions in the Rishonim, and maybe it's in Israel or 180 degrees off from Israel, or there's a bunch of different opinions trying to figure it out. But when in World War II, when a lot of Jews escaped to Japan or to Shanghai, there are opinions that the Dateline runs somewhere near there. And the question was raised, what is their day? When is Shabbat? When is Yom Kippur for them? And there were different rulings. Some rabbis of Europe ruled they're on one side of a Dateline, and some rabbis ruled they're on the other side of a Dateline. And Jews, especially a lot of yeshiva students there, actually kept 2 different days of Shabbos, or some people kept both days Shabbos, both days in Kippur, which, by the way, is not so simple either, because if you keep 2 days Shabbos, then you're missing a day of Tefillin, etc. So that's not necessarily the best
How many
solution.
years did that last for?
That was a couple years, a year, 2 years. But the question still remains. There are parts of the world that are still inconclusive. I think Hawaii, and there's the shliach and the rabbi. There's different opinions of what they should keep.
But it's only 1 day difference, though, right?
Yeah, but you could have 2 people. You could have 2 people in the same location keeping 2 different days because they go according to 2 different rulings. We could be neighbors. My Shabbos is your Friday, and your Shabbos is my Sunday. You know.
Well.
The question was, do you follow the way of the land or not? It's been complicated. We have it easy today. Just take that as a lesson. Okay, let's continue. Now we're up to as follows. Rav Ashi Kashile de Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda. Last line of 289 and 198, and last line of Daf Beis Amud Aleph.
Oh, Rabbi.
Rav Ashi Kashile de Rabbi Yehuda de Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Ashi found a question that challenged the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda against himself. Meaning, we just learned before, if you recall in a Brisa, a teaching, a ruling of Rabbi Yehuda. What was that ruling? That this dispensation for villagers to read the Megillah earlier only applied before the temple was destroyed. But once the temple was destroyed, it doesn't apply anymore. Yes? That was his ruling. Rav Ashi says, we got a big problem here, because I'm about to show you a different ruling of apparently the same Rabbi Yehuda, that disagrees with that. So now that caught you on your own. Imagine you give a drasha, you give a sermon, you give a psak, you give a ruling, and someone says, your ruling is, you yourself ruled elsewhere differently. What's the issue? So the Gemara says, he found this dispute, and therefore, what did he do? Instead of resolving it, he had an easy way. What did he do? Mukim lo lebraisa k'Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda. He just changed the author of the brisa. Since I'm about to find the Mishnah, we're going to talk about soon, that is in conflict with the teaching of Rabbi Yehuda here, I have a better answer. I'll just say that we got the author wrong. This brisa was not Rabbi Yehuda. This brisa was Rabbi Yosef, the son of Yehuda. And the Mishnah later we're about to learn is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, there's no dispute anymore because it's 2 different people. Now, that's a pretty.
Now, is this the son of Yehuda?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure. It might be. I don't know. Okay, what was the dispute? Let's figure this out. It's a strange thing going on over here. As follows. Did Rabbi Yehuda really say, like we just learned earlier, that nowadays, after the destruction of the temple, the villagers can no longer read earlier because they caused this confusion when to keep Pesach? Did he say that? Or Reminhi means I'm going to raise a contradiction. A question. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, if you would go fast forward 3 pages to page 5. Page 5 is the next Mishnah in the Talmud. Now, we just learned the Mishnah on page 2. We're going to have Gemara for the next few pages explaining the Mishnah, and on page 5 is the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah is a bit of a continuation of the previous Mishnah. It explores what are big cities, what are small cities, how do we categorize them, and then based on the ruling of our Mishnah about villages, Rabbi Yehuda says as follows. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ei Mosai, when can the villagers read the Megillah earlier than the 14th? If it's a village, a location that they actually do come to the main cities on Mondays and Thursdays, because those main cities have Beis Din Kavua, they have established courts over there, and the courts are running on Mondays and Thursdays, and so there's reason for the villagers to come in on Monday and Thursday to have their cases adjudicated. If they come in, then we give them the dispensation that if Purim falls out on Wednesday, we'll let them come in on Monday and hear the Megillah. But in a place that the big cities don't have established courts, they don't have court cases or courts running on Monday and Thursdays. Not all cities have that. So if they don't have that, then the villagers have really no reason to come in. If they don't come in, well, then in that situation, when they're not coming in on Wednesday, then we don't give them a dispensation to read it earlier, because for what point? What are you gaining? Your whole gain is, why should I schlep into town again on Wednesday? I was just there on Monday. But if you're not going there on Monday because the Monday there's no reason to go there, then villagers also have to read in its correct time on the 14th.
But I thought that another reason why the villagers come in is for
the market.
trade.
Yeah, so that's a good point. What I just told you, I was quoting Rashi, and I'll read you Rashi here. And Rashi says, if I can find it, Makom shenichnasim, the places that gather, right? He said, "B'makom shebez din kavua," the places which have established courts, and therefore the villagers come in on those days to adjudicate their cases. That's how Rashi says it. Now, in other places, we saw that it looks like there's other reasons, like the marketplace. It could be. I mean, it could be that was like an added bonus, but the real reason was for the court cases, or. It's not so clear. It's a good question you're raising. I have the same question also.
Court case, how often does someone need to go to court? But you need more, much more to sell your products.
Not everybody would go to the city on Monday or Thursday.
Well, yeah, I hear. I mean, it could be back in the day they were living on a farm, living in the village, and maybe a lot more issues arose. Menial issues, animals, trespassing, fences, borders, whose land is this? Yes, so it could be there were more menial civil issues, business issues that came up much more than nowadays. Also, maybe there wasn't a lot of regulation. You know, we're used to a fairly organized, regulated system, so things run, hopefully, pretty in an organized way. Maybe things were different then. The way the Gemara is saying here and the way Rashi is explaining it, it seems like the main focus of coming in Mondays and Thursdays was for court cases. So what did Rabbi Yehuda just say? That doesn't apply to places that don't do it. Yeah? Now, when is this Rabbi Yehuda talking? Before the temple was destroyed or after the temple was destroyed?
After the temple was destroyed.
Correct. Why are you saying that?
Because the sages said he was agreeing with the sages.
Sages say after the temple was destroyed, there's no dispensation at all for any villagers, even those that come in on Monday and Thursday. But Rabbi Yehuda, remember, the next mission is the continuation of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah expresses the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, which is the stam, the anonymous opinion, which is the ruling, that villagers always, in all situations, in all times, can read earlier. The next Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda qualifies this ruling of Rabbi Akiva and says only if the village actually comes in Monday and Thursday, but not if they don't. But he's talking also after the temple was destroyed, because their opinion of Rabbi Akiva of our Mishnah is all time, is before the temple was destroyed and after the temple was destroyed. And so this dispensation for the villagers is all the time, even after the temple was destroyed. Just Rabbi Yehuda says, not discussing a time frame, but sort of a location, a circumstance. Villagers that do come in, but if they don't come in, then they don't have it.
But can he qualify Rabbi Akiva?
He can certainly express.
He can disagree with Rabbi Akiva.
So perhaps he's disagreeing, but he's disagreeing about after. There's no indication that he's disagreeing that after the temple is destroyed, you can't do it at all, and beforehand, only on those villages which do come in. There's no indication that way. The simple flow of the Mishnah says, I love what Rabbi Akiva says, meaning I agree that you can read it, you can have this dispensation before or after the temple is destroyed, but I'm just qualifying or arguing and saying it only applies to villagers that do come in Mondays and Thursdays. So the Gemara says, but however, in villages which do enter the big cities on Monday and Thursdays, then they can read earlier, starting from the 11th, even nowadays, after the temple was destroyed. And now we have a problem. Because this Rabbi Yehuda of the Mishnah, on page 5, disagrees with the Rabbi Yehuda of the Brisa that we quoted earlier or last week. The Rabbi Yehuda of the Brisa says that the dispensation for villages only applies during temple times, not after the temple was destroyed. Rabbi Yehuda in the next Mishnah says this dispensation applies to villages also after the temple was destroyed, so long as they are villages that come into town on Monday and Thursday. So Rabbi Yehuda, make up your mind. Which one is it? So this is Rav Ashi's question. So what did Rav Ashi say? Let's do a cool thing. We're going to change the author of the Brisa. You made a mistake. It's not Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore, it's very simple. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, next Mishnah says, even after the temple was destroyed, villagers can read earlier than the 14th, so long as they normally come into town Mondays and Thursdays. Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa says that no, after the temple was destroyed, villagers no longer have this dispensation to read the Megillah before the 14th. Simple, different authors. Now, is it that simple?
Yeah. Can't be that simple.
Theoretically.
You can just change an author like that? So the truth is, the answer sort of is yes, meaning, think about this. Rav Ashi might be living a few centuries after this Rabbi Yehuda lived. Okay? Rav Ashi lived at the end. Rav Ashi was the one that compiled the Talmud. He has in front of him stacks and stacks of manuscripts that he's been collecting for decades from all different schools around Babylon, around Israel, for centuries. Okay? This stuff has never been published. A teaching in the 2nd century in the yeshiva in Surah was transcribed. It was put on a shelf. It was put in a geniza. It was put in a whatever. And now 3 centuries later, Rav Ashi is collecting everything, right? So he has to rely on the notes of students who are transcribing everything. If you find the manuscript, you find 2 manuscripts from 300 years ago, and they're in disagreement with each other, and they're both saying that they're authored by Rabbi Yehuda, you could put into question how reliable is one over the other.
You can see handwriting.
Huh?
Handwriting.
I know what's written, but who said it was written?
Handwriting.
I know what's written, but who said the person that wrote it got it right? Who said the person that wrote it got it right?
Right. The manuscript that he's reading may not have been written by Rabbi Yehuda. Neither one. It was transcribed by a third person. So
By their students or whatever, and he made a mistake. He wrote Rabbi Yehuda, but he meant to say Rabbi Yosef, the son of Yehuda. He forgot to add in those words. In that kind of context, it makes sense that we wouldn't do it loosely, but since we have here a major conflict, I mean, unless you want to tell me Rabbi Yehuda is every day changes his mind about things, that would be more unpleasant to suggest. That Rabbi Yehuda is that kind of guy. What do we call it in politics? We call it a flip-flop. So you have 2 options here. Either to call him a flip-flop, or to say he's not a flip-flop. Just this wasn't him. It was somebody else. Now, all the more so if you can find a support for that. Imagine you found that we're not being told that over here, but it happens elsewhere in the Gemara, where somebody will change an author, and then the Gemara will say, and I can prove you're right because there's another manuscript by that person who that's support. And if you could find support and evidence, you're doing even better. We don't have that over here, but it's on this basis that Rav Ashi changes the author. However, the Gemara says, we have to, just because you have a question, a conflict about what is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, you can just change the author. And I just described to you why it's somewhat reasonable, but the Gemara is saying, hold on a minute. Is that the way we do things? We find a question and therefore, boom, let's just change the author. Yeah. By the way, the Gemara's question is a little deeper than what seems. On a simple level, you said the Gemara's question is like we're asking over here. You don't just do that. You can't just erase and add and fix things like that. You can't just do that. But you know what a deeper question is? Because I said earlier, you have 2 options. Either to say that Rabbi Yehuda is a flip-flopper, or he's not a flip-flopper, but it's a different author. The commentators explain here, the Gemara's question is deeper. There's actually a 3rd option, which apparently could be a better option. You could argue that both the teachings are in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. However, they're not disagreeing with each other. You could argue that in the Brisa, which Rabbi Yehuda says that the dispensation for villagers is only before the temple was destroyed, but not at all after the temple was destroyed, you could say Rabbi Yehuda there was explaining according to the Chachamim, according to the sages. The Chachamim who ruled, we don't give a dispensation to villagers. Rabbi Yehuda said, we did before the temple was destroyed, but not after. And the next mission, Rabbi Yehuda says, even after the temple was destroyed, we allow villagers who normally frequent town and mandatory to do it, but not if they don't frequent. You could say there, he's explaining according to who? According to Rabbi Kiva. So there is a way to resolve this. Don't go deleting things. And Rabbi is not a flip-flopper. You can actually resolve this. You could say that he was explaining two different opinions. One was explaining the sages, and one was explaining the Rabbi Kiva.
Why couldn't he have said it in the name of Rabbi Akiva? Why couldn't
He did.
he have been more?
Maybe he did. It wasn't recorded properly, but he did.
Like Rabbi Akiva really meant this in this.
It
way.
did. In other words, this mission is a flow from the previous mission. To suggest that the next mission is explaining Rabbi Kiva's word is an easy one, because it's the same mission, it's the same flow as Rabbi records it. Rabbi Kiva made his opinion, and the very next mission, Rabbi Yehuda says that only applies to villagers that come in, but even after the temple was destroyed. The other brisa, which Rabbi Yehuda said sort of seemingly in a vacuum, does not apply after the temple was destroyed at all. There we'd have to comment, we'd have to interpret, he's actually basing himself on the opinion of the sages, which said it's not allowed at all, and he explained that that's after the temple, but before the temple it is allowed. Anyhow, it's possible to resolve the question that way. If you could resolve it that way, then why was Rav Ashi so quick to start deleting and changing names? So the Gemara says, here's the answer. Rav Ashi Shmielei the Ikke de Tani Lokar Rabbi Yehuda, Vike de Tani Lokar Rabbi Yehuda. Here's the crunch, and this is going to pacify a lot of your questions. Rav Ashi had the following tradition. He had several copies of this, several manuscripts of this teaching. He found a few manuscripts of this Baraisa that said that the dispensation only applies before the temple was destroyed, but not after. Some of those copies were in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. Some of those copies were in the name of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Yehuda. So he had an issue here, but he didn't create the issue. The issue came from the different sources that he had. So now he's thinking, since, how are you going to resolve it? Who is it? Who's the author? Right, we can't go back in time to ask them. But he says, hold on a minute. If we say that it's Rabbi Yehuda's the author, then we're going to have a problem. Because then I have a kasha from Rabbi Yehuda against himself. Because here he says, in this manuscript, it's not allowed at all after it was destroyed. And in that Mishnah, he says, it's allowed for villagers who come in Monday. So based on that, he concluded, the manuscripts that have it recorded in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, lav dafka, were inaccurate, were not precise. And the manuscripts that recorded it in the name of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Yehuda, dafka, they were the precise ones. So now it all comes together.
How do you say that?
It seems obvious.
That the first ones weren't precise?
I have two different manuscripts here. Same teaching. Just one says Rabbi Yehuda taught it, and one says Rabbi Yossi taught it. Okay. One of them is wrong. One of them is clearly wrong. One of them was recorded poorly. Somebody 300 years ago made a mistake, which, by the way, is so common or so possible. You're writing something down, you're taking notes. Imagine right now you're taking notes from this shiur that we're giving over here, and you recorded one name wrong. I'm throwing so many names out. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yekiver, Rabbi... You recorded one name wrong. Is it possible? Very possible. No? So he has two manuscripts, same teaching, different names. One is clearly wrong. Which one? He says it's obvious which one is wrong. Because if it's Rabbi Yehuda, that's the wrong one. Because if that was the right one, we'd have Rabbi Yehuda arguing against himself. So obviously that's the wrong one. That's the imprecise one. And the other one is the correct one. That's how we had the liberty to conclusively change the author of that teaching, or not change, to choose which one is precise and which one is not precise. Ivanti Yossi.
This is, I know when I learned Gemara, it's so hard already that the rabbis, the names of the rabbis, I kind of like tune it out. And I just say, okay, there's one opinion that says this, there's another opinion, whatever. Now, how important is the name of the rabbi that is giving the ruling?
Okay, that's a great question. I want to actually comment about that. Look how much effort we're putting into finding out, to identify the author of a teaching. Just tell me the teaching. Who cares who says? It's the Rambam, it's the Ramban, it's Rashi, it's Taisvin, it's whatever. Just tell me. But it is really important. It can be really important because I'll give you an example. If I tell you a teaching from the Rambam, the Rambam rules X, Y, and Z about a particular topic that we're talking about, any topic that we're talking about, you can look at it in two ways. You can look at it as like in a vacuum. Okay, the Rambam has an opinion over here. The Ramban argues, the Rashba argues, whatever. This is the Rambam's opinion. That's one way to look at it. But there's a better way or a more correct way to look at it. The Rambam is a person who has like a whole worldview on Torah, on how to interpret Torah, on, right? I mean, just because, the Rambam is right, and the Rashba is right, and the Rashi, everyone is right. That's like in the Gemara also, meaning we have a concept. This is what's fascinating about Gemara, or about Torah in general. We have a concept, when you have two different opinions, we say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Both these words and these words are words of the living God. They're both right in a certain realm. Remember, and this is a very important belief that we have. When we talk about sages of the Talmud, we're not talking about human beings like you and I. We're not talking about people from, last generation. The chief rabbi of Israel said like this, and the Sephardi chief rabbi said this, and the Ashkenaz said like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who, this is our belief, talking about people who existed on a different level. When they said things, they were holy. It was real. It's you're right, and you're right. Now, you're going to argue, you can't all be right. Right? It's like the rabbi, you know the story? The rabbi, two people come to see the rabbi by their court case. So the first person presents his case, and the rabbi says, sounds like you're right. Second person presents his case, and the rabbi says, sounds like you're right. So the rebbetzin walks in the room, and she tells her husband, they can't both be right. So he says, you're right also. Right? Okay. But in the Gemara, in Torah, you're right, you're right, you're right. However, remember, when it comes to halacha is bottom line. What should I do? There can only be one ruling. So this is a bit of a spiritual teaching, but it's brought down in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. These and these are both words of the living God, but the word used for God is Elokim. And elsewhere, when it talks about the halacha, it interprets a verse. I think it's about David HaMelech, and the pasuk says, "V'Hashem imo," the Yud Kei Vav Kei name of God, "V'Havaya imo," the Lord was with him, "V'Halacha kumato," and the ruling, the law is like him. So Chassidut explains there's Elokim, there's the name of God of Elokim, and there's the name of God, the Yud Kei Vav Kei. There are different names of God, meaning different manifestations, different expressions of God. Generally, we say Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the name of Havaya, the name of creation. That is the name of God that is sort of the revelation of the essence of the infinite God, the God that creates, the God that is the essence of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei stands for Haya, Hoveh, V'yiyeh. The God that was, the God that is, and always will be. The infinite God, the God that transcends all limitations, transcends all boundaries, transcends our world, transcends any kind of finitude. Right? Just think about these words. Haya, hoveh, v'yeh. I want to see if you can picture this in your mind. I don't know, unless someone has a pen with them. I'm not sure if I should write it out. Yeah, let me write it out. Okay. So let's write down. If you write down the three words Haya, Hoveh, Yiyeh on paper, yeah. So I'm writing down Haya. I'll show it to the camera. Yes. Haya. You can't see it because I'm on a green screen. Oh my gosh, Yossi, how do I get this thing? Now I block myself out. Okay, it's not coming up on the green screen. No. No. Hello? No.
Let me write.
Okay, write Haya. Take a pen. Okay, now we're on top of it, on top of Haya, we're going to write Hoveh. So what's the only change really we're making? The Yud is turning into a Vav now, yeah? Now it's Hoveh. I mean, it's Hoveh on top of Haya. And now we're going to write Yihye. Yud-He, Yud-He. What's the only change we're making?
Adding a Yud.
We're adding a Yud here. I'm going to make a dash here. And then Hey.
You write
And then
Hoveh,
Yud is already
double
there.
Vav?
Hey's there.
Do you write Hoveh with double Vav? Or it's only modern Hebrew?
Yeah, one Vav. One Vav.
Vav?
Yeah,
One
but you have to write them on top of each other, Yossi.
Right.
Not one underneath the other. No, on top, literally. אתה מבין מה שקורה פה? Not on top and underneath.
Like superimposed on that.
Superimposed on top.
Oh.
He can't see your paper. No.
I'm on the green screen. It's not picking it up. It just blocks me. How do these things work? White, it doesn't like white? How does it work?
I don't know.
Take the green screen.
Okay, bottom line is, what happens when you wrote all four one on top of the other? What did you get? Yud Kei Vav Kei. Huh?
Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Haya, Hoveh, V'yeh. You get God's name. So Yud Kei Vav Kei is the God of revelation, the God of infinity, the essence. Elokim is the name of the tzimtzum, of the contraction, of the finite God. Elokim is the God that contracts that light into a more limited way that allows for a creation of the physical world, for example.
But why does it have like a plural form?
And therefore it's a plural form because plurality or duplicity or more than oneness can only exist in the realm of Elokim. In the realm of Yud Kei Vav Kei, everything is oneness. Just the oneness of infinity. In infinity, you don't have division. Right? How many, if you have 10 pieces of rice, 10 candies, how many additional candies to get to infinity? That's an error. Infinity is not made up of lots of things. Infinity just is its own new category. So in infinity, there's pure oneness, which is why, if you want to know if you're connecting with holiness and godliness is always expressed in oneness. When two people are getting along, when a community is getting along, when there's shalom, when there's peace, there's God. When there's unity, there's God. When there's division, there's the absence of God. Now, there could be holy division and unholy division. So there is like machloket l'shem shemayim. So holy division would come from Elokim. Elokim starts to create the finitude within creation. Elokim allowed for a world like ours to emerge where there's so many different pieces, different expressions of God's godliness and God's creations. So therefore, in the realm of Elokim, you can imagine there are several different true opinions of the Torah. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. The Gemara says, Yesh shivim panim la Torah. There are 70 faces to the Torah. There are 70 different ways to interpret everything to the Torah. 70. You can have 70 different opinions, and they're all right. They're all right. They're not the halacha, but they're all correct interpretations of Torah. But if you want to know the halacha is what's the oneness? What's the one opinion that is more than just right, but it's the truest of the true, which is therefore becomes the accepted ruling. That's the opinion that connects not with Elokim, but with Yud Kei Vav Kei, with Havaya. Whoever is Havaya imo, halacha kamoto. And that's how we rule the halacha.
This is actually the psika.
Halacha is psika.
So how does this all tie back?
How did we get onto this?
Because I asked you how important is.
The names.
The names. How do we know what's Rabbi Gamliel, what's Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi
Oh,
Akiva?
okay. Let's go back to our Rambam analogy.
Right.
So the Rambam makes a ruling, right? Don't look at this in a vacuum. It's more than that. The Rambam has his worldview, has his whole connection with Torah, the way he interprets Torah. And the way he interpreted and arrived at this ruling, in a way, if you were really clever, you would identify the thread, the pattern in his thinking, and you'd therefore understand why he rules that way in that ruling, and that way in that ruling. The Rashba, the Ritva, Rashi, and other one may argue with the Rambam. That's okay, you let her argue. They have a different, not just interpretation of this particular law, a different entire approach and connection with Torah. And therefore they come up with different results in different places.
But we don't.
Now, 1 second. Now, fascinatingly, in the last century or 2 centuries, there are some rabbis, great geniuses, who did a lot of work in this, of developing patterns of different of the sages, particularly of the Talmudic sages. Famously with Shammai and Hillel and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, right? They're often what we call pairs of people who always argue with each other, right? Shammai and Hillel, or the schools of Shammai, always argue with each other, right? Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva always argue with each other. And there's many, many more such examples. So you could find, let's say, 30 different places in the Gemara that argue with each other. So one way of saying is, okay, have an argument about this thing, argument about that, and they're all unrelated to each other. No. Get deep. Figure out the persona of Rabbi Akiva, the soul of Rabbi Akiva, the mind of Rabbi Akiva, the way he connects with God, the way he connects with Torah, the way he thinks, the way he interprets. If you figure that out real deeply, you'll understand why in all those 30 places he interpreted that way. It's all, as we say, l'shitate. It's all there must be an English word for this. I can't think of it. It's all a thread of his thinking, and therefore that applies in this case, that case, and that case.
That's a high level.
At a really high level.
Okay,
There's some. I'll tell you. There's Rabbi Yosef Engel or the great Rogatchover. There are some people that did this, but then more recently, which is I've studied a lot, is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He did this a lot, and he did a lot of work with Shammai and Hillel. He did a lot of work with Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, and we could learn some of those lengthy, deep, difficult discourses, and they will blow your mind.
He lived on that.
They will. There are a few discourses about this that they will blow your mind when you study it, because he'll take 10, 15 different areas of Torah completely unrelated to each other, and he'll show you how they're all connected to each other, and he'll show you how they're all connected to the soul of Rabbi Akiva, who was Rabbi Akiva, to his life story, to his journey.
Would we be able to understand?
Of course, we'll take us some time, but we'll get through it. It'll blow your mind away.
Right,
Yeah.
But for him,
It's fascinating.
For him, it's literally just like looking at a page. For
So,
us,
'cause
we need to go
yeah,
here,
yeah,
there,
yeah. A mind like that sees it. A mind like that sees it straight. Yeah. So why is it important to know? I'm giving one answer. Who the author is, because it's really important. If you're the author of this particular statement, okay, that tells me a lot about you. I'm going to arrive at a different area of law. I'm going to want to know what your opinion is. I should be able to figure it out based on your opinion here.
So this is ultimate logic.
So it's very deep.
Ultimate logic. It's like.
It's very important. Anytime somebody, even nowadays, you ask a question, a person, what's the halacha about, can I do this or that on Shabbos or whatever? And the person says, I learned that it's not allowed. You know what your question should be? Who says that? It's very important to find out the author. According to whom? Right. Because, first of all, I may follow somebody else, for example, or I'm curious about this person's opinion because I heard about this person another ruling which seems to conflict with this. Like, identifying the author is really, really important. By the way, off topic, there's a law that says think the Magen Avram brings in, I believe. Let's say someone asks you on Shabbos, can I do this or not? And you know, you've learned before the answer is no, but you forgot where you learned it, you forgot where it comes from. But your friend needs your response because you're going to prevent him from doing a sin. You're allowed to say, I know you're not allowed to, and he asks you, tell me where you know it from, you're allowed to make up a name. You're allowed to say, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chazon Ish. You're allowed to say it.
But you have to be sure that
You have to be sure, yeah.
you heard it from a legitimate
Yes,
source.
correct, yeah.
Right.
Even though you
Not
know
like
their
your
name.
next door neighbor thinks that he heard it from.
You know, it reminds me of that story that that I think you told about the Rabbi and the guy that went to him and asked him, and no, they sent a note, and the note had a question to Tehillim. Like, what happened with the Tehillim? And I get the chills. How did he know? Because he lives on that level, and he can feel that level. So, you know, that's it's such a deep. Do we know? Do the Jews? Do we ever talk about the Akashic records?
The who?
Akash.
What's that?
Have you ever heard? You've never heard of the word Akash?
Talk to me.
Okay, so in the Indians.
Kind of got way off topic.
Yeah, well, no, but it's on that level of.
Let's conclude here because we have a couple minutes left,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna get to the Akash.
Yeah. No, but it's fine.
Okay, so the truth is, at this point, we're up to 2 dots. Is it in the original Gemara? Yeah. Let's see the 2 dots on the original page, which was to finish this section. And I thought we are going to get through the next section, but we didn't. Today, we're going to start the next section of the Mishnah, which is to identify walled cities and unwalled cities. We have been talking all this time about villages, right? And I summarized today, we did in the past few weeks. Today, we added to figure out the opinions of Rabbi Yehuda, the way Rav Ashi resolved them. We learned a bunch of other things. We're not going to go further now because next week we're starting the next section of the Mishnah describing the walled cities and the unwalled cities. But I'll end with one story. Okay? So I said that I taught the teaching that there's 70 faces to the Torah, right? Meaning there are 70 ways that the Torah can be interpreted, and they're all correct. The story goes like this: the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, was once traveling, and he arrived in a town that was at that known to be a very, we'll call it a very Hasidically challenged town. So a Lithuanian town, and the Litvisha, the Misnagdish, it wasn't Litvisha, it was Misnagdish, and they were great Torah scholars there. And he walks into the synagogue, and there was the Rosh Yeshiva, the Rav, was giving a class. And the room was full of Talmidei Chachamim, very wise scholars, and then the Rav is even a greater Torah scholar, and he's teaching a very complex passage in the Talmud. And then they arrive at a point where a student asks a question. It's a very difficult question, and the whole room turns silent. Like, wow. Perhaps he stumped the teacher. So then the teacher offered an answer. The Rosh Yeshiva offered an answer, and the students made with their face, it's not the answer. He offered another answer. He couldn't get through it. The Alter Rebbe was listening the whole time. The Alter Rebbe, by the way, was a Gaon, a genius, Talmud and Jewish law and everything. So he politely walked up and he said, "Excuse me, if I may, I'd like to offer an answer," which he did. And when he offered his answer, everyone in the room was blown away. Wow, gewaldig, amazing. Okay. After the class, the Rosh Yeshiva, who was a little bit humiliated, he came over to Alter Rebbe and he says, shkoyach for your answer. Really appreciate it. Definitely better than anything I thought of. Appreciate it. However, I have a question. I don't understand why you offered your answer, it was better than mine. Everyone really enjoyed it. When I offered my answer, though, I was booed. They made faces and doesn't it say, yes, shivim panim l'Torah, there are 70 faces? There's many ways to interpret Torah. So maybe you had a better answer, but wasn't my answer also a good answer? Now, it appears the Alter Rebbe knew who he's dealing with. And if I could add my commentary here, probably this person was a very arrogant person who needed to be put into his place a little bit. So the Alter Rebbe answered, I don't know if I should say this on camera. The Alter Rebbe answered, it says, the way the Hebrew is Yesh Shivim Panim La Torah, which means there are 70 faces. And that's an expression of 70 expressions of the Torah. But Panim means a face. So the Alter Rebbe said, and every face, every Panim has an Achor. Every face has a Tuchas behind. So there are 70 faces, and there must be 70 Tuchas to the Torah also. And your answer came from the realm of the Tuchas of the Torah.
Talk about a slap around.
Anyhow,
Attitude adjust.
to be continued.
Yeah.